Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar. On behalf of the ASDSA, I'd like to welcome Jonathan, our speaker for today, who will be talking to us about the 3 lessons ARTG learned with their pilot project, Occupational Certificate Underwriting. There will be some pop-up questions during the webinar. To answer the question, please select an answer. You can vote on your screen. Okay, great stuff. Everybody knows how the polling questions work now, so we can get started. Enjoy the webinar.
Occupation certificates are the new buzzword in the skills development landscape. But how do they differ from unit standard-based legacy qualifications? And what practical implications do these differences have on learnerships? During the implementation of the pilot project for insurance underwriters, ARTG learned many valuable lessons which we believe are critical not only for providers, but also for learners, employers, SETAs, and the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations. In this session, we will share just 3 of those lessons. By way of introduction, African Resources Training Group is an African training company accredited by the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations, Insurance SETA, Local Government SETA, and Accounting Technicians South Africa. We have a national footprint and have been in operation since the year 2002. We are a group of like-minded, highly experienced and qualified professionals with a passion for people development. We prioritize the skilling and reskilling of people for current and future jobs within the context of the 4th Industrial Revolution. We offer highly progressive, well-planned, and creatively designed programs. I will now provide an overview of the pilot project and share the 3 lessons to be covered in this session. 2 things will happen at the end of each lesson. Firstly, you will have an opportunity to post any questions that you may have. We are privileged to have with us Mr. William Rogers, the ARTG Director who heads up our Operations Division. He will be supporting me to ensure that we can respond to as many of your questions as possible. Secondly, you will be required to answer some questions about each lesson, and you should therefore pay careful attention to the content of the presentation because your correct responses to these questions will contribute towards your CPD points. In the pilot project, we implemented Qualification 91784 entitled Occupation Certificate, Insurance Agent, Insurance Underwriter. The qualification is registered at NQF Level 5, carries a total of 156 credits, and is run over a period of 18 months. We trained 46 learners employed in underwriting jobs and drawn from insurance companies based in Gauteng. Some of these learners had extensive experience as underwriters, while others were new to this occupation. The program covered the 3 streams of short-term, long-term, and medical. Lesson 1. The occupation certificate requires a total paradigm shift. Firstly, it is much more complex than a unit standard-based legacy qualification. In the qualification design of occupation certificates, the knowledge component focuses on studying theory, the practical component on the application of such knowledge through exercises and case studies, and the workplace component on real-life experience. These 3 components culminate in the external integrated summative assessment, which was totally non-existent in the unit standard-based qualifications. The delivery structure is also somewhat confusing because in this specific qualification, for example, there are 4 modules, each of which have a number of themes, and for each theme there needs to be a knowledge assessment, a practical assessment, and a workplace assessment, all leading to the external integrated summative assessment. Secondly, workplace experience is the priority, not an afterthought. According to the QCTO rules, the knowledge, practical, and workplace components should each carry a minimum of 20% of the marks. However, in the case of the underwriting qualification, 60% of the marks go towards the workplace component. Workplace learning is therefore not mere lip service, and the logbook is serious business. Thirdly, ASDSA tests the whole qualification. With legacy qualifications, you're done once each unit standard has been completed. With occupation certificates, after completing the knowledge, practical, and workplace components, ASDSA once again tests the content of all 3 components. This means that continuous revision of all the content is necessary throughout the duration of the learnership until the date of the ASDSA exam. It's question time. Please post your questions on lesson number 1, and you will also be presented with some questions that you will be required to answer. Feel free to post your questions in the chat group. And the questions at this stage just limited to the content that we've covered so far, particularly on lesson 1, the paradigm shift. Anyone with questions? No? Okay. There's one question. How does it impact on learners if the workplace does not participate fully?
Jonathan, you want to answer it or me to answer?
Okay, let's just get... Right, William, could you perhaps assist with the question that we have up there? You there, William?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Sound is very soft. I wonder if you shouldn't just post your response on the chat group. Okay, Angelique, I think we should continue with the question that needs to be answered. William has responded to the question there. We can perhaps have a bit of a discussion at the end again. Okay. Lesson 2. Workplace mentors are much more involved. The main function of the workplace learner has 3 components, namely, support the learner, track what the learner is doing, sign off the learner's work in the logbook to confirm competence. We learned during the pilot that mentors are much more involved and spend a lot more time in the learning process than is the case with legacy qualifications. Providers, on the other hand, must focus on helping, guiding, encouraging, and urging the internal mentor to check what the learner is doing from day one. It is highly recommended that an external mentor be appointed to support both the learner and the internal workplace mentor in meeting the logbook requirements. The greatest challenge related to mentors is getting internal mentors to provide the level of support that the learners need. This requires mentors to find a balance between their work and supporting the learner. It also requires good systems to track logbook activities. Other requirements are close follow-up with mentors to ensure that they are meeting regularly with their learners, an active external mentor to be vigilant and help learners and mentors who are struggling, and the involvement of other internal role players like senior line managers to encourage both the learner and the mentor to keep this a priority. An additional lesson learned is that planning is critical to the success of the learning intervention. Learners should plan their learning upfront and add activities to their diaries. For example, study time, meetings with their mentors, contact time with facilitators, and submission deadlines for all the many assessments that they must complete. Please post your questions for Lesson 2.
Thank you. Let's see your questions. Okay, let's continue with the presentation.
Lesson 3. Practical implications of the external integrated summative assessment. The training provider issues the learner with a statement of results which the learner uses to apply to the QCTO to write the ISA. There are only a few set dates for the ISA each year. The biggest challenge is that ISA can only be written 3 months after the learner's results have been confirmed. The pilot project made us realize that when you take all the assessment, remedial, moderation, and CETA verification activities into account, learners can only write the external integrated summative assessment 5 months after submitting their final assessments. This constitutes a very serious challenge to the learners because they need to retain the content fresh in their minds throughout this waiting period. It also has very serious implications on planning all of the training activities that need to take place. The QCTO provided the question papers for the mock exams which we used to prepare learners for ISA. What we realized is that the training provider must encourage the learners to complete these mock exams and assist and support them to improve their marks. This means additional facilitation, it means additional feedback, and it also includes reviewing the learning that had been completed at the start of the program, because the ISA will test all the content that has been covered in the full qualification. It's question time for lesson 3.
I see the question from Dorothea. Where is the detail documented? Now, with the detail, I assume you are referring to the report, on the outcome of the project. Is that correct, Dorothea? Okay. Right. What we could do then is I'll have a discussion with William and see whether we can prepare a summary report on the lessons learned in the pilot, and we can then share that with the participants.
The closure reports for the pilot are going to be submitted to the CETA once the final ISA exam is now written at the end of this month. The learners were given 4 opportunities to write the final ISAs, and we got 2 stragglers that are now writing in November. So once they have closed off that final write, then we're going to submit the final closure report to the CETA to close the project off. So it's been a very interesting process in terms of how these learners have actually struggled to finally write the ISA, and the CETA has allowed them to actually extend their time and allow these learners extended time in writing the ISA so that they could finish their workplace assignments, so that they could allow everybody an opportunity to actually get to a point where they can write their ISA, because the workplace projects became so important and so delayed because mentors didn't help, couldn't help, left the workplace, people were moved around, etc. And going back to the earlier question, what was the impact of the mentors moving around and not assisting? It was quite huge. And we found that even when a mentor didn't assist the learners just to sign off some of the documentation, that these learners became very troubled, and from a coaching perspective, but also from just getting their documentation completed, bearing in mind that the QCTO has a massive audit spectrum and watch you very closely. So we've had to be very kind to these guys, and thus the final report will be only submitted towards the end of this year, or very shortly. That answers your good. Just to answer one of the other questions I was just picking up here. Is the ISA an online exam? No, the ISA was not an online exam. It was an invigilated exam written in ISA approved or QCTO approved examination centers. That was a process that had to be done by the AQP. Well, the AQP is the assessment quality provider. In this case, it was the INCETA. And there was a whole process by which they had to go about and get these centers approved. A provider couldn't be an AQP, and there were a whole bunch of rules in this regard. Okay. Does anyone know whether we'll have the same time delay in writing the FISA? No, we don't know. We do know that the FISA will only be written once the CETA has verified a learnership set of documentation, and we don't know the timeline after that, but we do know that it will be set on a set schedule. We do know that the FISA will probably be invigilated by the learning provider, okay? as at this moment, but as far as we know, that's changing moment by moment. What happens if someone fails the ISA exam? It really depends on the qualification requirements. So with this particular qualification, the learners were allowed a second opportunity to write. But one has to be very careful because different qualifications have different qualification rules. So with the underwriter's examination, the certificate that ARTG issued had a validity period of 1 year. And within that period, the learners had to submit and write the ISA exam. And if they then failed that ISA exam, they had to then submit and write the ISA exam for a second period. So the qualification allowed them to write 2 attempts during a period of 1 year. If they then didn't make that, they had to then go back and prove that they were ready formatively for a second time. So there's some new rules coming in from that perspective, and from what we've spoken to the QCTO and understood from the QCTO, those would be qualification dependent. I think I've answered everything. Is there anything else?
Thank you, William. One other thing about the mentors, the workplace mentors, and I hope everyone can hear me. I can see the concerns with the poor quality of the sound. When companies recruit learners, especially the employed, the workplace mentor should ideally be the supervisor in the department where the learner will be working, supervisor or manager. And because of the intensive involvement of the mentor in the learning, unlike the unit standard-based qualifications, the mentor certainly needs to be a subject matter expert or a content expert in that particular occupation, because a sales manager in one department, for example, it doesn't do justice to the mentorship support for a learner that's in a technical department, because they really need very detailed and close support. And the mentor needs to know the content thoroughly and be ideally an experienced person. You also need to watch the mentor-learner ratios, because it's not ideal that a mentor has too many learners to take care of. And finally, the workplace most certainly needs to support the learning process. And the logbook has absolutely got to be a priority. And it has to be a priority from the very first day. And the mentor has to work with the learner right from the beginning to ensure that the learner is fully committed to doing their assignments and submitting their assignments. Okay.
Jonathan, is my mic a bit better?
Your mic is better now, William.
Okay, I just did 1 or 2 adjustments there. Just to answer 1 or 2 questions I see from Dorothea, what happens if the unemployed do not have a mentor? Dorothea, these qualifications are not meant for people who cannot be unemployed or who are unemployed. They have to be in a workplace. So with the workplace component piece being so essential for these qualifications, they have to be in a workplace and a mentor has to be appointed to them. So you can't, like a legacy qualification, you can't just simply qualify a person and then go ahead and hopefully they'll get a job. Now, they have to be appointed into a workplace and have this workplace component completed as part of the qualification. The second question is it true that the QCTO provides free material? The QCTO does not provide free material. The various AQPs are providing material. The assessment quality providers. I know in our case, INCITA has provided generic material, but what we've found is that material has been very generic. So we've had to spend a lot of money and a lot of effort getting that material customized and ready for use. And not so much the learning material, but more so the assessment instruments. Our success in getting these learners through the material, through the ISA exam, was because we actually put a lot more effort into making sure that these guys knew their work and also that they were tested appropriately. Are the assessors and moderators still used in the process of compiling the statements of results? There's two answers here. So the QCTO does not require that we use so-called scoped assessors and moderators anymore. We made the mistake of trying to go with a systems expert or an SME once, okay, who did not have educational practice behind his name, and it was a very big mistake. So we very quickly reverted back to people who knew what they were doing as assessors and moderators, who also had systems, at least SME practice behind it. It's a big mistake if you don't use people who are not familiar with educational practice as such. The AQP, however, is also, it doesn't favor that you don't use assessors and moderators, but it's not a pre-requirement of the QCTO. However, the AQP does require you use assessors and moderators to sign off your formative assessments. You still need to undergo an internal moderation process. And the QCTO inspects that on very short notice. In our case, we've been audited twice on 1 hour's notice. Okay. I understand from QCTO that their year runs 180 credits in a year. Are there known? We still equate our design work to notional hours. It gives us a good idea of how to structure a person's year using notional hours. So we still do that as a practice. It gives us a template to work from in terms of how to set up a student's year. So from a design perspective, we still use notional hours, yes. Any more questions?
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, William.
Pleasure.
Right, Angelique.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for that. It was a wonderful webinar. What will happen now is after the webinar, I will send the recording as well as a link to the questionnaire to everybody who attended the webinar, and you will be able to answer the questionnaire and then gain your CPD points. To be able to gain your CPD points, you do have to fully complete the questionnaire and you have to submit the correct answers. Then you will get an email with your CPD point in it. And that's it for me. Thank you so much, Jonathan and William, for your time. Is there any other questions? If there is any other questions that pop up maybe afterwards, you could send them to info@asdsa.org.za and I can ask Jonathan and William to send me the answers for that. Cool. Thank you so much. Just a question there. Yes, you will get the CPD quiz on here and via email. I'm actually going to share it with you now as well. Just hold on 1 second.
And from my side, thanks everyone for your time. Thanks for listening. And we hope these lessons will be valuable to all those that still have to grapple with the practical implications of the occupation certificates. Thank you.
Okay, I've shared the link. I will keep the screen open for a while longer just so that you can save the link, but it will be emailed to you as well. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.